Yes, friends, now we have come to use our IES lights. IES lights, friends, are actually a type of light. We can call effect light, known as overhead light. We can use these as spotlights. For example, if we use them in places where there is a spotlight, the effect that comes here will always leave a nice impression. For example, I'm entering, look, normally, since they are all components, when I select one, they all get selected. When I say add IES light to one, it will automatically suffice for all of them. This component topic is a fundamental subject of SketchUp. Those who don't know this can watch the component topic nearest on our SketchUp Turkey page, Friends. The topic of groups and components is one of the most basic commands in SketchUp. Look, it says IES light here. I took the IES light. Here it asks me for a file name. It wants an ES file. Look, it says IES file. It wants an IES file. For example, I came to F. I will add these for you as well. Let's see if we have any IES files in our archive. IES light. Yes, we have IES files. Look, I am saying IES collection here. It says best IES. Let's enter and see what's there. For example, I selected the IES number 20. I say open and added it here. Of course, I added the IES randomly, friends. Now we will see what kind of effect the IES has. Now I am going from Direct for SketchUp to Asset Editor. I came to the light section. I selected the IES light. Look, my IES light has this kind of effect. Do you see it, friends? So each IES light has a different effect. Thin, long, distribution, up and down distribution. You can see them for yourself by using these. Activate the intensity section from here. It appears to be at a value of 1700 lumens. From here you can adjust the color section as you like, friends. You have the chance to set it to either blue or yellowish tones. Look, it applied to all of them. Let's even render it to see how it looks together. It leaves a nice effect, especially at the base of the walls, friends, because the effect looks better in areas close to the wall. But it might not give an effect here. However, it still has an impact on the lighting, quite a lot. I'll press the render button. Let's get an effect. Again with the IES lights. In the next part, friends, let's change the textures. In our scene with the coatings and textures from the Cosmos library, and correct the incorrect coatings. For example, like the excessive reflection over here. Friends? And we also have a light source. I will show it to you here. In this part, how it is done. Look, at 1700 lumens, a light source is visible here. The reflection of the light source is visible. In other words, it can be set to 2000 lumens or 5000 lumens. It's beneficial to go for slightly higher lumen values to make the effect more visible, friends. Let's do it like this. Look, do you see? There is an effect here. There is an effect over here, friends. But the effect is a minor one. Let's do it like this. Look, I stopped this. Here, look, there's a part called region render. It renders the area we selected. Before that, to speed things up, let's set this to 5000 lumens in the settings. After 5000 lumens, let's check the options section to see what's there. We have a setting for whether shadows, reflections, and glares should be visible. I press the render button. Let's check again. How does it look, friends? We increased it a bit more. Now this part here will look different. Let's see what kind of effect we'll get. Look, the marble reflection here is different. We can replace these with the marble coating from the Cosmos library. Look, it's doing the calculation. The value has increased a bit more over there, friends. But of course, to see the effect of the value here better, it would be better if these were, how should I say, a bit more at the base of the walls, friends. But it will still have the same effect here. We don't have any issues at the moment. These have an indirect contribution to our lighting, friends. Now, our other type of light is this. Friends, look here. It's convert mesh light. Now, here's the situation, friends. Let's say we have an object here. For example, we have this cylinder object. Let me show you with the eyedropper tool on the cylinder object. The logic here is an important one. We've applied emissive light, if you notice. Where did we use emissive lights? We used emissive lights, which we call emissive, meaning any color, that is the color here, as a light source. So where did we use it? We used it in the light sources on the ceiling here. We used it in places where there are spots, as the burning effect of the spotlight. We also used it here. However, these are lights that are not included in the best physical calculation logic of Vray's calculation logic. So they are not included in indirect lighting. In other words, they are not beneficial. But you can use any light. Let's close this. Let's say any light. Any material, when you make it a mesh light. For example, I selected this sphere. Look, it has become active. Here now, do you see it? It is currently active. Normally, when you do not select the object, it is in a passive state. As soon as you select the object, it becomes active. Look, I want to show it again. I have now moved outside the object. It is now passive, as you can see, friends. So in this menu, it is passive. When I select the object, it becomes active. Why? To convert it into a mesh light, friends. What happens when it is a mesh light? It becomes a light source that affects our scene and calculations like a normal spotlight or rectangular light. Is it better for an object to be a mesh light, or is it better to be an IS light, and meaning an emissive light? It's better to be a mesh light, friends. I took the mesh light and selected it. Look, it became something with blue around it and dashed lines in the middle. I can go and see from the settings here in the light section under mesh light that it has an intensity of 30 degrees, and the light is like this. I can also take this and turn it into a more yellowish or a less toned object like this. When I set this to 60, this will now provide light downwards as a light source, friends. An important part. In fact, you can also do this here. Look, you can do the same thing with this material. For example, let's see. Look, I'm going in deeply, friends. I selected my eyedropper tool, selected the material. I came here, look, it says emissive light. However, instead of emissive light, make this a group. And then go here to make it a mesh light and go to the settings. Friends, look from the settings, mesh light 1. This first one is the first mesh light. This is the second mesh light. I bring this here and adjust its color to be a bit more yellowish. I set this to a value of 60. This way, this will be the light value, friends, and its reflection and calculation value will be stronger, friends. An important part for us. We can even do the picture over there. Let's say hi to the picture. I selected the control picture. Look, I said mesh light. I have selected this, friends. In fact, by going to the settings, what should we do with the intensity of this from mesh light 2? Let's make it 5. Yes. Now I came back to the two sections again. Let's take a render with the latest settings we made. Let's see how it looks. I'm pressing the render button and waiting, friends. Yes, while our render is ongoing, we actually saw that the mesh light here is very dark. We made the picture here a mesh light, but it turned into a state where the picture's feature was lost. We will adjust it again. Let's convert it to emissive light, friends. We see the light effect here. It didn't affect much, but since it's between two panels, the current value is sufficient for us. Let's turn on the denoiser. As you can see, we are faced with a clean effect like this. Actually, the toning of the light is very good, friends. But the light effects here are a bit tiring for our eyes. When we apply the lens effect, look, we can lighten its color a bit more. We can increase the light intensity a bit more. The light intensity was a bit low. Now, I'm stopping this. I'll be back again. I need to delete the mesh light in this setting, friends. Let's say Control Z. Look, you can delete this. I'm saying Control Z again. I deleted this. Let's say hide to this and see which. Yes, I've selected this image. I'm switching to this setting image. From emissive light, look, it says Vray MTL. I'm copying this, friends. I press the plus sign. I'm saying emissive light. After emissive light comes this into its own slot. I am pasting this by saying paste. Let's see. Actually, the entire image should be visible here. Let's try copy again and say paste. Copy from here. Yes, this didn't appear, but we will need to add the image to this again. It can't find the thing. It's like that because it can't find the image file, friends. Let's see where the image file for this is. Escape. It should be in the training set section. Let's go to the Y section. I mean, it got stuck a bit now, but a different image format can also be uploaded. Let's see. Let's say Y. Was the training set here? No, it wasn't here. Let's do something. We can upload any image file there. So this could be it. Let's set the intensity value to 5. Like this. In fact, let it be 5. Yes, let it be 5. In fact, let's say it's images like this. Texture position. Let's call this again fixed pins. Let's check the pins here. The pins actually need to be here. Later, when you remove the pins like this and place them here, they will fit perfectly in the image format, friends. It's as if there's a movie like a Star Wars movie. Let it stay at an intensity of 5. Let's also change the emissive. Our light here. This light here, friends, what was that light? Mesh light was 2. Sorry, mesh light wasn't 2. Let's delete this. This was mesh light 1. I'm adjusting the light intensity, like this. I'm going to set this to 150. Let it give a bit more light here. Let's take another render like this, friends. Let's see how it looks. By the way, this work and the Star Wars project are also mine. I made it in twin motion, friends. It looks like a movie, but I depicted it as a confrontation between a spaceship and 2 characters in terms of the story. That was also liked on the twin motion page. Let's see what kind of image we will encounter, friends. Look, the light coming from the TV on the screen also affected our scene. The scene changed suddenly. We are facing a somewhat different scene. I wondered for a moment if the IES lights were disabled. When we turn on the denoiser from here, look, it's like this. I wondered if the rectangle lights were disabled because there was a bit of a problem with the lighting of the scene. Let's say stop like this. Let's see. Yes, these are still on. Rectangle, lights are at 60, IS lights, mesh lights. Sometimes these irregularities can happen in Vray. Let's reduce the texture. We will use in this scene a bit. I mean, this is a bit too much. Let's make the TV image. Not 5, but 2. Let's face a slightly lower image. Let's do it like this. We got an image like this in the end. Let's check our settings. I wonder if our settings have been reset because we got a more faded image. These are auto. Yes, these are selected. In fact, let's do it like this, friends. Let's say revert to this. Let's reset the settings again because the settings are in our hands. We can change them as we wish. I said medium plus. Set this to auto exposure, auto white balance. I changed this to 1920, 1920, 1980. I also turned on the denoiser from here. And the next step I did was go to CUDA. By selecting these from here, I marked CUDA. CUDA is marked. Yes, this is the process, friends. Let's press the render button. Let's see what kind of image we will encounter. Because after doing the last step, my scene had become a bit dark. I wondered if the effect in the HDRI had decreased, but we will look at the scene again now. Yes, the scene has come back to itself a bit now, friends. I think there was a problem with the settings. I reset it again and brought it back to its original state. I had slightly reduced the emissive value here. It seemed like when the value here increased, the surrounding value decreased. Let's turn on the denoiser from here. Yes. When we turn on the last effect, we are faced with this kind of impact. In our next lesson, friends, we will use textures and coatings in a more varied way. We can increase the value of the emissive lights here. That is, the IES lights. I think we set it to 2,500. We set it to 5,000. By increasing the values in the 10,000s, we can further enhance the activity. We will add objects and actions to enhance the ambiance in these parts, friends. That's all for this lesson. See you in our next lesson.